I exposed my toxic family, and they demanded I sacrifice my baby for my sister's trauma. Karma was brutal. My sister and I are 3 years apart. Ever since we were kids, my mom always treated her like a spoiled child who needed special attention. That probably explains why, even now at 27, she still acts immaturely. I'm 30, and recently, my wife and I received the amazing news that we're expecting our first child. After 2 years of marriage and 5 years together, this new chapter in our lives fills us with excitement and joy. When we found out about the pregnancy a couple of months ago, we decided to share the news with our families first before making a public announcement. My wife's family was thrilled and celebrated with us. As for my family, my dad sincerely congratulated us, but my mom, well, she found a way to turn a happy moment into something negative. A few hours after telling her the news, she called me and said she didn't think keeping the baby was a good decision. I was completely caught off guard. My mom had always loved kids and had been excited about the idea of becoming a grandmother since my wedding and even during my sister's wedding. When I asked why she suddenly changed her mind, she started listing a bunch of completely arbitrary reasons to oppose our pregnancy. She claimed that having a baby would put a huge financial strain on us. She also brought up the fact that since my wife and I are both career-focused, we'd struggle to figure out who would stay home with the baby when we returned to work. I explained that we had carefully thought through all of these concerns. We had plenty of savings after years of stable jobs. Both of us had paid maternity and paternity leave from our companies, and we had already considered options like hiring a nanny or relying on family support if needed. None of her arguments were strong enough to suggest we should terminate a wanted pregnancy. I had a gut feeling there was something more behind her reaction, so I kept pressing until she finally revealed the real reason she was so concerned. And, of course, it all revolved around my sister. Apparently, my sister had also been trying to get pregnant this past year without success. My mom explained that my sister was struggling emotionally, and she felt that this was not the right time for us to have a baby. If we went ahead and started our parenthood journey while my sister was still trying, it could be emotionally devastating for her. Now, it's important to mention that my sister and I have never been close. Growing up, we constantly fought, and when I moved away for college, it was a relief for both of us. Because of this emotional distance, her feelings about our pregnancy didn't really concern me. If she couldn't handle the fact that we were expecting while she wasn't, that was her personal problem, not something that should affect our decisions. However, my mom has a habit of blowing my sister's problems out of proportion until they become full-blown family crises. I told her that I understood my sister's struggles with infertility, but suggesting we terminate our pregnancy just to spare her feelings was completely absurd. I even told her that, out of respect for our family relationship, I was going to pretend she had never made such a ridiculous suggestion. Instead of backing down, my mom doubled down. She went on about how my sister and her husband had been trying for a long time, and how our pregnancy announcement would devastate her. She argued that, out of consideration for my sister, we should rethink having this baby since it could create a family rift. The most shocking part was that my mom genuinely believed she was being reasonable. She truly thought we should get rid of our baby just because my sister would feel hurt. Realizing this conversation was going nowhere, I simply said, "All right," and ended the call with no intention whatsoever of following her advice. Then, I immediately blocked her on everything and told my dad what had happened. He apologized on her behalf and promised to keep her from trying to contact me again. And to his credit, he's stuck to that promise ever since. For the next 4 months, we kept our distance and enjoyed a relative peace. When we finally announced our pregnancy publicly on social media, that's how my sister found out. I have no regrets about doing it this way. We wanted to share our happiness with everyone, and if it upset my sister, well, that's not my responsibility. The fallout was immediate. A few days ago, both my sister and my mom showed up at my house unannounced, claiming they wanted to discuss the future of our family after everything that had happened. To be completely honest, I never really considered my sister part of my close family because she never acted like it. As I mentioned before, we've always been distant. Once we moved out and started our own lives, there was nothing forcing us to stay in touch. Our only interactions were obligatory family gatherings and invitations to each other's weddings, more out of duty than genuine desire. I was straightforward about this. I told my sister that I didn't see her as someone close or part of my immediate family, so I didn't feel any obligation to personally inform her about the pregnancy. Besides, if the roles were reversed, I was certain she wouldn't have told me first either. I would have just found out when she made it public. As for my mom, I reminded her that she created this mess with her own actions, and now she had to deal with the consequences. Her reaction when we first told her about the pregnancy was completely unacceptable, and I wasn't willing to keep that kind of negativity in my life. I told them that even if they were here to apologize and reconcile, I needed time to process everything. I couldn't just forgive and forget instantly. I was brutally honest because I didn't have the patience to sugarcoat things. My sister immediately broke down crying, which honestly surprised me given how distant we'd always been. I didn't understand why she expected a softer response. While my mom comforted her, she revealed something that slightly softened my stance. My sister and her husband had recently been diagnosed with infertility. After nearly a year and a half of trying, doctors couldn't pinpoint exactly why she couldn't conceive, and all they could do was tell her to keep waiting. She was devastated, and our pregnancy announcement had made things even worse for two reasons. First, it hurt to see us celebrating a pregnancy while she was still struggling. And second, finding out through social media made her realize just how much our relationship had deteriorated. Now, she wanted to fix things. I appreciated the effort, but I stood my ground. I told her I needed time to process everything and decide if I even wanted to rebuild our relationship. I expressed genuine sympathy for her struggles and wished her the best, but I made it clear that my top priority was my wife and our baby. Everything else would have to wait. Apparently, that wasn't the response they wanted. They started calling me selfish and narcissistic for refusing to forgive them. They even accused me of hurting my unborn child by keeping them out of our lives. At that point, I lost my patience. I told them that my child would be loved no matter what. And considering my mom had wanted me to terminate the pregnancy just to spare my sister's feelings, I didn't think keeping them away would be a bad thing. The argument escalated until my wife, who had been staying in our room to avoid the stress, had to come out and ask them to leave. That was the last straw. I lashed out and said things I now regret. I told my sister that at least I could have a child, something she couldn't say. I called her pathetic for wanting to use my baby to fulfill her maternal desires. I told my mom she had failed as a parent. They stormed out, cursing me on their way out. Even my wife was shocked by how harsh I had been. So, am I the bad guy for fighting back? Update 1. It's been 3 days since the argument with my mom and sister. During this time, I've only shared what happened with my wife and my dad. They both share a similar perspective. While they acknowledged that my words were harsh and maybe excessive, they believe they were justified given the situation. Even though I feel bad about what I said in the heat of the moment, I don't feel the need to apologize. After all, neither my mom nor my sister have apologized for what they said, and they were the ones truly responsible for the conflict. If they had respected my request to leave, none of this would have happened. Instead, they chose to stay, confront me, and push me until I finally snapped and said those things. It's a huge relief to know that the most important people in my life don't see me as the villain here, even if I regret saying what I said. And since they feel I don't really need to apologize, I don't plan to. After the incident, I'm not sure what my sister has been saying about me, but I do know for a fact that my mom has been complaining nonstop for days. She's been venting her frustration constantly to my dad, who has defended me every single time, something I'm deeply grateful for. However, this has only made my mom even angrier because she sees it as him endorsing my bad behavior. I find it ironic that she can't see that this is exactly what she's been doing with my sister her entire life, which probably explains why my sister is the way she is. My mom insists that I owe both her and my sister a huge apology, claiming that they were only trying to be there for me and that I turned them into villains for no reason. The funny thing is, I feel the exact same way about them. So, I guess it's just my word against theirs. Bottom line, they're not getting an apology from me because they got exactly what they deserved. If they hadn't pushed me, I wouldn't have reacted that way. It's that simple. Like I said, my only priority is my wife, and I'm going to do my best not to let this kind of nonsense get to me moving forward. Update 2. It's been a week since the confrontation with my mom and sister. Even though I tried to keep the matter private, discussing it only with my dad and my wife, they decided to do the opposite. They posted about me on social media but selectively. They only mentioned the things I said without providing any context. I'm not exaggerating. Their post was just a single paragraph quoting my words, with no mention of what they said or the events that led up to the argument. As expected, I started receiving calls and messages from the rest of the family, criticizing me for making such awful comments toward my own family and expressing their disappointment. Some even questioned whether the post was true because they couldn't believe I'd say something like that. Shocked by their post, I first checked in with my dad, who was just as surprised as I was. He told me he had already tried to convince them to take it down, but so far, they had refused. Furious at their behavior, I decided to take matters into my own hands. After discussing it with my wife, I posted a full account of what actually happened that day. I didn't deny saying the things they accused me of, but I made sure to provide the full context so everyone could understand the entire situation. If they were going to seek sympathy from everyone, I was going to make sure people knew the whole truth. I laid everything out: how they showed up uninvited, what my mom had said about my wife's pregnancy months ago, and what really led to the argument. After my post, people started showing their support. Many even reached out to apologize for jumping to conclusions, admitting that now that they knew the full story, they could clearly see which side was in the wrong. Personally, I don't really care because I know my actions weren't nearly as bad as theirs. I didn't even need people's support. If I had been looking for sympathy, I would have been the one to post first. My only reason for setting the record straight was to stop us from getting unnecessary hate. Apparently, though, my mom and sister don't understand this concept. It's been a couple of days since both of our posts, and they're still accusing me of being a self-absorbed attention seeker, which is ironic because that description fits them much better. They keep insisting that their actions didn't justify my reaction and that my words were outrageous, regardless of the context, though the rest of the family doesn't seem to share that opinion. Either way, I'm glad I was able to tell my side of the story. Update 3. It's been a few days since my last update, and this morning, while checking my messages on social media, I noticed several people letting me know that my mom and sister had deleted their posts about what happened. Apparently, they started receiving quite a bit of criticism from the rest of the family, which forced them to take them down. It was clear that no one was buying the narrative they were trying to push, that I was just seeking attention and sympathy by defending myself. The general consensus among the family seemed to be that, while my words were harsh, they were justified given the circumstances. Unable to handle the pressure, they decided to remove their posts, which honestly felt like a pretty big win. I've decided to keep my post up for a few more days, just as a precaution in case they try something new. Something interesting also happened a couple of days ago. Shortly after I posted my side of the story, my brother-in-law reached out to me. Since my relationship with my sister has always been distant, I haven't had much interaction with her husband either, so his message came as a pleasant surprise. He told me that he knew his wife would never apologize to me, and up until now, he hadn't thought she had any reason to. After all, he had only heard her version of events. However, after reading my post, he wasn't so sure anymore. He asked me to keep our conversation private and apologized on his wife's behalf. He explained that ever since she found out she'd be dealing with infertility for a long time, and that a natural pregnancy without IVF wouldn't be possible, she had been extremely emotionally unstable. From the tone of his message, it was clear that he was going through a rough time as well, and I couldn't help but feel for him. I replied that I appreciated his gesture and was glad he reached out to apologize. He actually seems like a genuinely nice guy, and honestly, I wonder how he ended up with my sister. I've kept my promise not to share this conversation with anyone until now. But honestly, I don't really consider this breaking the promise. Update 4. It's been a couple of weeks since my last update. I recently decided to take down my post, thinking it had been up long enough and that by now everyone knows the truth. Plus, I didn't feel the need to keep punishing my mom and sister any more than they're already being punished by their own behavior. In a recent conversation with my dad, I found out that my sister and her husband are heading toward a divorce. Apparently, ever since she found out about her fertility issues, her behavior has become completely erratic. While she's always been overly spoiled, arrogant, and a bit unstable, lately, her actions have reached an intolerable level. She's become extremely toxic, and while her husband tried to deal with it as best as he could, he finally hit his breaking point after a recent argument. As a result, she's moved back in with our parents, turning my dad's house into a constant soap opera. Predictably, my mom continues to make sure my sister doesn't feel bad, blaming the husband for everything that's gone wrong, and reinforcing the idea that my sister can never be wrong about anything. Honestly, I feel bad for my dad, who has to deal with all this. I also feel a little sorry for my sister, considering she just found out she won't be able to have kids, and now her husband's leaving her too. While the latter is clearly a result of her own actions, I'm not cruel enough to gloat about her misfortune, which is why I decided to take down my post. That said, this doesn't mean I'm going to apologize or try to make amends, because I'm convinced they haven't really changed. My dad even told me that there's this "it should have been me, not my brother" mentality in the house regarding the pregnancy. So, I think the best thing is to keep my distance, and as always, my wife comes first. As long as she's happy, I'm happy, and right now, I can confidently say that I'm very happy.
My parents gave the house I bought for them to my sister, so I stopped paying the mortgage, and the house was auctioned off by the bank. I'm a 28-year-old man, and I've been paying the mortgage on a house I bought for my parents, only to find out they gave it to my 25-year-old sister. Worse, they didn't even bother telling me. I've always known my parents love my sister more than me, but I never thought it would go this far. My parents have this toxic and deep love for her, but sadly, they have nothing for me. As the oldest of two siblings, they always had higher expectations for me, and I was instilled with a sense of responsibility from a young age. My younger sister, Perry, was treated like a princess. Not exactly like a princess since my parents didn't have much money, but she always got what she wanted. My parents had no academic expectations for her. She could explore her passions and hobbies while I was buried in my studies. It was always like that. My parents weren't subtle about their expectations for me. They made it clear I needed to build a solid career and couldn't fail at my studies. After I graduated high school, my parents took out loans and spent their savings to pay for my technical school. I suggested that instead of draining their savings, they take out a loan for my education, and I'd pay it back after getting a job. My parents opposed the loan because of the high interest. They said I'd end up paying 1.5 times the principal. I was too young to understand the complexities of a loan. I thought if my parents said it, it must be right. I was only 18 at the time. Little did I know they were saving me from the burden of a loan just to take advantage of me later. Not long after finishing college, I got a good job in tech. Exactly what they wanted for me. They were definitely proud, but I always felt like some sort of commodity, like they had invested in me expecting something in return. They never missed a chance to say, "We've sacrificed so much for you. Don't forget where you came from." At first, it seemed harmless. I thought they just wanted to keep me humble, but over time, I realized it was emotional manipulation. Emotional blackmail was their specialty. As I started working, the pressure mounted. Every time I visited, my dad would hint at how I shouldn't forget he spent his savings to pay for my education and how I needed to work hard to repay their sacrifices. I knew my parents needed a house. They'd been saving for years, but spent that money on my education. I remember I had just started my career. I hadn't even been working a full year when I went home for a visit. While we were having dinner, my dad looked me straight in the eye and said, "We did our part by paying for your education. Now, it's your turn. You should start planning to buy a house for us soon. We can't rent forever, right?" My stomach dropped when he said that. I knew they expected me to buy them a house, but not so soon. I hadn't even been working a year. I was still sharing an apartment with 2 roommates because I couldn't afford one by myself, and my parents were already asking me to buy them a house. I was like, what the hell? I protested. "Dad, I just started my job. I can't even afford the rent on my own place. How do you expect me to take on such a big financial commitment?" He said he wasn't asking right away, but that he was planting the idea in my head so I could plan and work hard to make it happen. My mom chimed in with a deceptively sweet voice. We paid for your university. Without us, you wouldn't be where you are now. Think of it like paying us back. I didn't have the heart to argue. They weren't wrong. I was where I was thanks to their sacrifices. But sometimes, their lectures were too much to bear, and I wanted to scream. Who asked you to do this for me? But I didn't have the guts to confront my parents. I kept a respectful distance and only took their calls when it was urgent. Visiting them was out of the question after that dinner conversation. I used my job as an excuse to avoid them. However, the obligation to buy them a house stayed with me, lingering in my mind. So, after 5 years of saving and working hard, I gave in. I bought them a house, a modest, nice house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable. Everything seemed fine. I thought it was the least I could do for my parents after everything they'd done for me. I paid the mortgage for 3 years, even paying a little extra to pay it off sooner. I had other plans in life. I want to buy my own house, travel, start a family, etc. I can't carry this loan indefinitely. After buying them the house, my parents stopped bothering me about helping them out. They proudly showed it off to their friends and family, boasting about how their investment had paid off. I didn't mind, but it didn't close the gap between us. I still kept my distance and didn't visit often. 2 days ago, I decided to visit my parents after being swamped with work for months. I didn't give them a heads up. I wanted to surprise them, but there was a surprise waiting for me. When I arrived at the house, I saw Perry's car parked outside. I thought she was just visiting, and the idea of a family gathering made me happy. Perry had gotten married and moved out while my parents were still renting. It had been years since I last saw her at her wedding. I knocked on the door, and Perry answered in her pajamas. I thought she was just stopping by for a little while. We hugged and exchanged greetings, and then she asked, "What are you doing here?" I replied playfully, "I could ask you the same." I went inside and asked, "Where are Mom and Dad?" She casually sat on the couch and replied, "Oh, they moved." I froze. They moved? What do you mean they moved? This is their house. Perry shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. I guess they didn't tell you. They actually gave it to me. I live here now. I felt like the floor was shifting beneath me. They gave you the house I've been paying for. Yeah, she said indifferently. It made total sense. Mom and Dad said I needed it more. You know, I'm planning on having a baby soon, and they thought I should have the house. I was stunned. I asked, "Where are they living now?" She replied, "They're renting an apartment on the other side of town," as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I left without saying another word, my head spinning with anger. I drove straight to their new apartment without caring if I showed up unannounced. When my mom opened the door, I wasted no time and said, "What the hell is going on? Perry just told me you gave her the house I bought, the house I've been paying for. Can you explain that?" My mom had the nerve to smile like it wasn't a big deal. "Calm down, sweetie, come in. We didn't think you'd mind." I walked in but didn't bother sitting down. I wanted answers. Somehow my voice rose. "You didn't think I'd mind? You gave away the house I bought without even talking to me? How could you think it wouldn't matter to me?" My mom sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "Well, we thought since you're doing so well, you wouldn't care. Perry's planning on having a baby. Do you want your nephews to be born in a rented house and grow up in an unstable environment? Now that they have the house, they don't have to worry about rent. They can focus on other things, like their child's well-being." I exploded. "I don't care where my nephews are born or raised. I don't mind them living in a rented house. We did. I still live in a rental, and it's not my problem to think about them. It's Perry and her husband's problem. If they want stability, they can get better jobs." Hearing the commotion, my dad came out of the room and said, "What's all this fuss about? She needs financial security. We had to give her the house. She didn't have the same opportunities as you. We didn't pay for her college, so she deserves this house." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's what parents do. Say whatever they want without being confronted. I responded, "You didn't pay for her college because she never went to college. She dropped out of high school, remember?" They refused to understand the gravity of what they'd done. They kept saying, "You're successful. You can buy another house. Of course. I won. But it'll be for me or for you. I didn't even know how to respond. I felt like the world was crashing down around me. I couldn't understand their logic. I just stormed out of their apartment, furious. I checked into a hotel and have been here ever since. I really don't know what to do. I can't keep paying the mortgage after learning the truth. But dealing with the situation is a real challenge. I know my parents can't afford the mortgage, and I'm sure my sister couldn't either. This drama happened on Friday, and today is Sunday. My flight back is on Tuesday. At first, I thought about booking a flight immediately and leaving, but when I calmed down, I realized I had other things to do here. I wanted to check how much was left on the loan since I've been paying extra, so I think I'm ahead on payments. Before my visit, I asked my dad about the mortgage balance. He said he needed to check with the bank manager. I texted him to take me to the bank tomorrow to get more details on the remaining balance. Even though I don't want to keep paying the mortgage, I want to know the current status. Update 1. There's more to this story, and I'm literally shaking as I write this. We just got back from the bank, and what I found out left me devastated. The extra money I was paying toward the mortgage never actually went to the bank. My dad was only paying the actual mortgage and using the extra money for his own expenses, specifically to pay the rent for his apartment. I've been living so frugally all these years, below my means, saving just a little more so I could pay off the mortgage sooner. When the manager showed me the monthly deposits, I told him there must be a mistake because we were paying nearly 1.33 times the mortgage amount. I even opened up my transaction history to show how much money I'd been sending my dad every month. Then my dad stepped in and said the manager's numbers were correct, that we were only paying what was due on the mortgage. At first, I thought my dad was confused, that he didn't understand the situation, but then he grabbed my arm and said, "The records are correct. Let's talk about this later." I felt another blow. I was dizzy, bracing myself for another betrayal. I sat there, stunned, as the meeting ended, with the manager giving us details on the remaining mortgage balance and other options for refinancing, etc. I stayed silent. As soon as the manager left us alone, my dad pulled me aside and asked, "Why are we even talking about the extra money? Did you send it for the mortgage?" I replied angrily, "Of course. Why else would I send extra money? I told you it was for the mortgage." What he said next left me speechless. "I thought you were sending it for our expenses. I used it to pay our rent." I stared at him, then sat down, burying my head in my hands. What do I do with my parents now? My dad sat next to me and asked me not to make a scene, saying it wasn't a big deal. I exploded. "Not a big deal? You made me buy you a house, then gave it to Perry without even telling me. On top of that, you used the extra mortgage money to pay your rent. Let me tell you, my dad's not the type of man to stay quiet and take being confronted by his son, especially in public." He snapped back, "Don't you dare raise your voice at me. You didn't do me a favor by buying us that house. I spent all my savings to pay for your college. I don't have to explain to you what I do with that house. You sent me the money, and I paid the mortgage on time. What's the problem if I use the extra to cover our rent? It's not like we were asking for more." I was furious with his words. "The extra was meant to pay off the mortgage early, not to fund your new apartment." I stormed out of the bank. As I walked down the street, I could hear my dad shouting my name, but I didn't look back. I kept walking toward the subway. My mom called me 4 or 5 times and also sent a text asking me to come back home so we could sit down and talk about it. I didn't respond. I don't want to talk about anything. I've made up my mind, and I'm going to do what I think is right. No more of their toxicity. Update 2. Sorry for the spelling and grammar mistakes in my last update. I was shaking with anger. I had to edit it to make it legible. I also didn't respond to some of the common questions I received in the comments, so let me address those first. Some asked if my parents are Asian. No, we're not. Let me bust that myth. Asians aren't the only community whose parents push their kids to extremes. I don't want to reveal my ethnic background, sorry. Some also asked, who was the loan holder? Well, the loan was in my dad's name. I didn't confirm it because I wanted to buy a new car and maybe a house in a few years, and being associated with that loan could have affected my future loans. Now, I'm glad I made that decision because it made executing my plan easier. Now, onto the update. The next day, I went back to my normal life. A month passed, and I didn't send my dad the mortgage money. As expected, he tried to contact me on the first day of the month, only to find out that I had blocked him. Not just him, blocked my mom, my sister, and her husband too. I don't want any more drama in my life. I made my decision and stopped paying the mortgage. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. If my parents wanted to give the house to Perry, fine, let her take care of the payments. Let her be responsible for it. When my parents realized what I had done, they lost it. I got some calls and voicemails from unknown numbers. Maybe they used their friends' numbers. I don't know. It was something like, "You can't just stop paying. We don't have the money to cover the mortgage." I laughed inside. Well, it's not my problem anymore. I blocked those numbers too. But that wasn't all. 3 days later, I found my dad standing at my door when I got home from work. He was furious and said, "You can't just leave like this. You owe us. We paid for your college. We made you who you are." I replied right away, "Already paid you back. Do you realize how much I've spent on that mortgage? It's more than what you paid for my college tuition. I don't owe you anything." He called me ungrateful, but I cut him off, saying, "No, you can't guilt trip me anymore. I've done more than enough. I'm not paying the house, the rent, or anything else. You made your choice. Now, deal with the consequences." They treated me like a commodity, investing in me by sending me to college, and now they want to squeeze this cash cow for life. I'm not a commodity. I walked out the hallway and drove off. I didn't go into my apartment because I knew he'd follow me in, and I wasn't ready to deal with more drama. When I came back later that night, he was gone. My mom tried calling me several more times from new numbers, leaving desperate voicemails. Even Perry left me a long message from another number, saying she needed the house for her future family and that I was being selfish for not helping. Selfish? Me? The one who's been paying for everything while she did nothing. I wasn't giving in to any of their manipulations. I'm done with them. I've cut all ties completely. Update 3. The house was sold at auction, and Perry was forced to move out. As I mentioned before, Perry couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, and my parents were already financially strapped, paying for their apartment rental. They couldn't manage the mortgage, rent, and household expenses. When I stopped making the payments, I knew this would happen. It was just a matter of time. After almost a year, I found out that the house had been sold. My parents did everything they could to save it, using their savings and cashing out their retirement money, but they couldn't. Things also got tense between Perry and my parents during this time. While they were struggling to pay the mortgage, they asked Perry and her husband to contribute 50%, but she refused, saying the house was a gift to her, and they should handle the full mortgage payment. That's when my parents realized the mistake they made with me, but by then, it was too late. I think my parents did the right thing by letting the bank auction and sell the house, rather than continue paying the mortgage and let Perry stay in it without contributing. The house was auctioned off, and my dad got back a considerable amount of money, part of the down payment, and the monthly payments he had been making all these years. With that, he has more than enough to recover what he invested in me. I know it's my money, but I'm not expecting a single cent of it. They're not going to give it back to me, and I have to let it go. At least now, they can't say they did me a favor by paying for my college tuition. I've already repaid that favor with interest. Now, I don't feel guilty for cutting them out of my life. From what I've heard from my cousins and aunts, my parents moved to a smaller apartment to reduce their rent costs. They've also saved the money they got from the auction for their retirement. They've been telling everyone they don't want to depend on me in their old age, and that they're in a better place now. They've also cut all financial support to Perry, and told her she has to manage on her own with her family. Yeah, she tried to manipulate them again, saying they paid for my college tuition and secured my future, so they were also obligated to secure hers. However, now my parents have faced reality and aren't giving in to her demands. Well, I'm glad for them. Meanwhile, I've rented an apartment for myself, finally getting some privacy. And now, I don't feel guilty for turning off that tap. If I stay in the house on my own, I'll finally have some privacy. I've also started saving to buy my own house, a place that will be mine and only mine. It's not easy to walk away from family, but sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who take the most advantage of you. It took me a long time to realize that, but I don't regret my decision. Family or not, I deserve better than being treated like a walking bank account. Update 4. I've seen a lot of people still asking questions, so I'm going to clarify a few points before getting into what's happened recently. One of the most common questions has been how much my parents spent on my education and how much I've spent on the mortgage for the house that was supposedly for them. Well, although I don't have the exact figures, I can tell you that my education cost around $40,000. As for the mortgage, including the extra payments I was making to pay it off early, but which my parents used to pay for their apartment rent, I've paid about $52,000. As you can see, I've repaid the exact amount. I no longer feel that I owe them anything. Some people have also asked about Perry. I want to clarify that she hasn't been left homeless, as some suggested. She and her husband are living at her in-laws' house, so no, I'm not that evil brother who left his poor sister without a home. Also, the house was never for her. It was for my parents. Perry and her husband could have taken on the mortgage payments, but, as usual, they didn't want to make the effort. The house was in my parents' name, and I didn't like the house. It was in my parents' name, and they were the ones who decided to give it to Perry, so they were free to pay the rest. So there was nothing I could do, and even less that I wanted to do for them. Now, the real update. My dad came back. It seems he had enough money for a plane ticket to visit me. Well, I correct myself, to demand something from me, not to visit me. He came to ask me for more money. This time, he wants me to buy them another house. After everything that happened with the first house, the one they gave to their favorite daughter, now, they expect me to buy another one. He told me they deserve a house because they've made so many sacrifices for us, their children. He always goes back to the university topic, reminding me of the great sacrifice of paying for my education, which, of course, never fails to come up in any conversation with my parents. And of course, he mentioned that they gave a house to their daughter, as if that wasn't the height of irony, considering the house was originally for them, not for her. According to him, they've already played their part, so now, they deserve their own house. I made it clear to him that I'm in no way buying another house for them. The money I've been saving is to buy my own house, not to solve their problems again. I told them that their chance to have a house was wasted when they decided to give it to Perry, and they should go ask her to buy them a house now. I'd love to see what kind of response they'd get from her. My dad stayed in the city for a couple of days and asked me to think about it and we could talk again. I told him no, that I wasn't going to help them with that. The next time I post here, I hope to be able to share the news that I finally bought a modest place I can call my home. Update 5. Here I am, to tell you that I've been able to buy my own house. There's still work to be done, like buying furniture and things like that, but I finally have a roof over my head that I can call mine. I've read all your comments and advice, and as many of you recommended, I haven't told anyone, not even posted it on social media. I've consulted a small group of friends who have no connections to my parents or family. They're friends I've made here in the city, so there's no way the news will get to my parents. I don't want to risk them doing what I've read in other posts, like asking me for the house to give it to my pregnant sister or something like that. So, I'm being extremely careful with this information. I don't want to end up in a mimosa situation where they ask for the house for the good of the family. I joke saying I'd even like to have an electric fence around the house to keep entitled parents at bay, but seriously, I've learned from Reddit that the best thing is to keep this info a secret, at least until I can set some solid boundaries. Now, instead of asking for advice on how to deal with parents like that, I'm here to ask for advice on something more enjoyable: decorating my new home. If there's anything I'm not good at, it's decorating. When I lived with roommates, there was always someone else who took care of that. And when I moved into a rented place, it was already furnished, so I never had to worry much about it. But now that I have this empty space, a blank canvas, I feel a little intimidated. I don't want to mess it up and turn it into a place without personality or bad taste.
My husband had divorce papers ready before I told him about my infertility, then got my sister pregnant 2 months later. But he should have made sure the baby was his son. I'm not new to Reddit, but I am new to writing my own story. I've always been the type to just read, and I used to think with horror. I hope I never have to share mine. But here I am. I'm 30 years old, and I was married to Philip, who's the same age as me. After 3 years of marriage, we decided it was time to start trying for a baby. I've always been one of those women. I wanted kids running around the house, filling it with laughter. So we started trying right away, full of hope. But month after month, nothing happened. After 2 years with no success, I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. I suggested seeing a doctor, but Philip wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea. He kept telling me these things take time, that I shouldn't stress so much. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed answers. Eventually, he agreed, and we both got tested. The news shattered me. I had a condition that made it extremely difficult for me to get pregnant naturally. The doctor told me my chances of having a successful pregnancy were slim. In an instant, all my dreams fell apart. I cried the whole way home. I had to tell Philip, even though it hurt me to my core. And then there was my mother-in-law, Martha, who was obsessed with the idea of grandchildren. Every chance she got, she would remind me how excited she was to have grandkids and ask when I was going to give her some. That night, I sat Philip and Martha down. I had to tell them everything. I barely finished explaining when Martha burst into tears. She was sobbing dramatically, like she was the one who couldn't have kids, not me. Honestly, she seemed more upset than I had been when I got the news. She didn't even ask how I was feeling. Philip didn't react at first. He just sat there, staring at nothing. I thought he was in shock and needed time to process everything. But then, he got up, left the room, and came back 10 minutes later with a stack of papers. Divorce papers. At first, I thought maybe they were just generic forms, something he had grabbed in a moment of impulsive anger. But as I started reading, I realized they weren't. These were real divorce papers, detailed, prepared, and even notarized in some places. That hurt more than anything. He already had them ready, just in case. Philip had been planning this. He was just waiting for the moment he felt justified in using them. While I was worried about fertility treatments, researching doctors, and trying to give us a chance to become parents, he was meeting with a lawyer. He was ready to throw our marriage away the second things got hard. No discussion, no commitment, just a way out. I'll never know exactly how long he had those papers or what was going through his mind while he kept them hidden. Had he been planning this moment all along? Was he just waiting for me to mess up so he could leave without guilt? He didn't even bother explaining or apologizing. It was Martha who broke the silence. She said it was for the best, that Philip deserved the chance to have a complete family, and that I shouldn't stand in his way. I don't remember much of what happened after that. Somehow, I packed a suitcase and left. I moved out, and just like that, our marriage was over. During that time, I leaned heavily on my younger sister, Joan, who's 28. She was my rock, always checking in, bringing me food, reminding me that I deserved better. Which was all a lie. Because the whole time, she was betraying me too. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Joan called me with exciting news. She was pregnant. But something about the whole thing felt off. She had never mentioned a boyfriend, and I knew she wasn't the type to have a one-night stand. So I asked her who the father was. After dodging the question for a while, she finally admitted it. It was Philip. She tried to excuse it by saying it just happened during what she called a difficult time in our lives. Yeah, our lives, like she was struggling just as much as I was. She claimed it wasn't planned, but that over time, their connection had grown. Apparently, while I was drowning in grief over my infertility and trying to hold myself together, they were comforting each other in bed, because they were devastated over my divorce. More and more excuses followed. She said, these things happen, that she had really tried to resist. But in the end, she told me that they were in love now and planned to raise the baby together. And as if that wasn't enough, because, of course, infertility, divorce, and betrayal weren't enough, things got worse. My parents took their side. They said I wasn't with Philip anymore, and it was Joan's turn to be happy. Martha, of course, was thrilled. She threw Joan a baby shower that was more extravagant than a wedding. She even called her the daughter she had always wanted. I couldn't take it anymore. I blocked them all: Philip, Joan, my parents, even Martha. I packed up my life and moved to a new city, determined to start over. The first few months were tough. It took time to adjust, but therapy helped me a lot. Little by little, I started rebuilding myself. I got a new job, met amazing people, and even started dating again. My boyfriend was a single dad with 2 kids, and they welcomed me into their family with open arms. For the first time in a long time, I felt loved and appreciated, not for what I could give, but for who I was. Then, after months of silence, Philip reached out. It started with a text from a number I didn't recognize. He said he wanted to talk and asked if we could meet. I ignored him. Then came the emails, the phone calls. Finally, he showed up at my workplace. I didn't want to see him. I told him to leave, but he wouldn't. So I said I'd call him later when I got home. And I did. That's when I found out Joan's baby wasn't his. After months of believing he was the father, Martha had forced him to get a paternity test. And it turned out Joan had been seeing someone else. The baby wasn't Philip's. Philip told me he had made a mistake, that he let his grief and his mother's pressure cloud his judgment. He said he realized he still loved me and wanted to fix things. He begged for a second chance, saying he couldn't move on knowing what he had lost. I let him talk. I didn't say much. When he finished, I sent him a picture. It was me, my boyfriend, and his kids at the beach, all smiling with our arms around each other. I told him I had found my family, the one I deserved. A family that loved me for who I was, not for what I could or couldn't give. He went silent. Then he tried to argue, saying, "It's not the same." But I told him it was exactly the same. And then I hung up. As if that wasn't enough, my parents have now been trying to contact me too. They say I should forgive them. Right. Because after everything, they still side with him. I've built a life I'm proud of. I don't owe them anything. So my response to all of them? They can all go to the same place I think they belong. Update 1. A few things have happened over the last 2 weeks, so I thought I'd give you an update. Don't think I haven't read your messages. I have, and I've replied to some. It meant a lot to see people commenting on my post. If I have to be the main character in one of these stories, at least let it be one that people comment on. Anyway, let's get to the update. About 2 weeks ago, I got a call from a new number. It wasn't one my parents or Phillips had used when they tried to reach me again. It was Marta, on a mission, to try and get me back with the miserable Phillips. According to her, he was all alone and devastated after finding out that the baby he was expecting wasn't his. She also said that maybe I didn't realize it, but women can find forgiveness within themselves. Then she brought up my infertility, saying it was time for me to accept reality and focus on being a good wife instead of holding grudges. It sounded like begging to me, which I found pretty funny coming from her. I made it very clear that there was absolutely no chance I'd go back to Phillips and that she really needed to stop playing with me. So she earned herself a call ending right in the middle of her speech about why Phillips was good for me. When I hung up, I thought it would have been nice to tell her she wasn't this concerned about our relationship when she helped him divorce me. So I called her back just to say that, then hung up and blocked her for good. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I hadn't. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. My parents were also on a forgiveness campaign, for themselves and for Joan. Their messages were along the lines of, "Well, it wasn't your ex's baby, so that has to count for something, right?" Yeah, it counts for something. It counts as proof that she's even more of a slut than I thought. The last straw was a few days ago. I was leaving work late at night, and suddenly, Joan appeared. She was frantic and exhausted, and before I could react, she started begging me for help. She said her life was falling apart and that she needed her big sister. Apparently, the real father of her baby had left, and she was at the lowest point of her life. She said she regretted everything and wanted to make amends. I told her she should probably plan things better because when she doesn't, she ends up sleeping with her sister's ex, along with other men. Then gets pregnant and ends up a single mother. It looked like the whole, being a loose woman, strategy wasn't working out for her. Joan ran off crying and sped out of the parking lot. I just stood there. Of course, my parents found out and called me the next day, furious. They said I was acting like a stranger instead of family. To which I told them that's exactly what I thought I was. I blocked them again. I don't understand how they have so many different phone numbers. Maybe after I left, they started a criminal organization, and that's why they have so many numbers at their disposal. I'm finally happy again, and they just want to ruin it. It's like they realized my life is better without them, and they need to stop it as soon as possible. I've blocked them a million times, but they'll keep finding ways to harass me because that's what entitled people do. They think they have the right to betray you, hurt you, and even take away your happiness. It's time to take legal action. Update 2. I've been doing everything I can to block my ex, his mother, and my family from contacting me. I changed my phone number, blocked them on social media, and even told mutual contacts that I don't want any updates about them. Despite all of this, they keep finding ways to intrude on my life, and now they've dragged my boyfriend into their mess. That's why we now have a restraining order against my ex. Let's start with the first problem. For a while now, my boyfriend has been receiving really weird and creepy messages on his social media and emails. At first, he thought they were just spam or random trolls. The messages started off pretty harmless, with vague things like, "Are you really sure you know who you're with?" Or, "Do you wish you hadn't done this so soon?" But then, they took a much darker turn. Some messages started including personal details about me, things only someone from my past would know. One email mentioned the name of my childhood pet, a dog I haven't talked about in years. Another included the address of the house I grew up in. That's when my boyfriend realized this wasn't random. He didn't tell me at first because he didn't want to worry me, but when the messages started coming in daily, he finally showed me. This was beyond creepy. Whoever was behind these messages had clearly done deep research into my life, and it was pretty obvious who it was. Phillips or someone in his circle. Just when I thought they couldn't sink any lower, things got even scarier. Last week, Phillips showed up at my boyfriend's workplace. Yes, you read that right. Somehow, he found out where my boyfriend works, walked into the building, and asked to speak with him. My boyfriend agreed to meet him in the lobby, thinking maybe Phillips wanted to talk like an adult. But, of course, that's not what happened. According to my boyfriend, Phillips started with a long, delusional speech about how I still loved him and how my boyfriend was standing in the way of our supposed happy future together. Phillips had the audacity to suggest that my boyfriend should break up with me for my own good, claiming I'd be better off with him. My boyfriend firmly told him to leave. That's when Phillips' entire demeanor changed. He got aggressive, throwing out threats like, "You have no idea what I'm capable of," and hinting that he'd make my boyfriend's life difficult if he didn't make the right decision. The right decision being to leave me so I could go back to my stalker ex. Because there's nothing I'd want more in this world than to reunite with my obsessive ex-husband. Thankfully, my boyfriend immediately called security, and Phillips was escorted out of the building. He told me about the incident as soon as he got home, and I could see how shaken up he was. He didn't deserve to be dragged into this mess, especially not at his workplace. I've contacted a lawyer and am in the process of taking serious action. I don't know how Phillips found out where my boyfriend works, but I'm determined to find out. My lawyer has advised me to document everything right now because it will help build a case against him. I've also filed a police report and am looking into getting a restraining order against Phillips, even if it's just a temporary one. Phillips is starting to show that he's mentally unstable, which honestly shouldn't surprise me, given that he's the kind of man who gets divorced because his mother told him to. But I think my family is even worse. Instead of being horrified by Phillips' behavior, they're more concerned about Joan and the fact that she's a single mother. As if I'm supposed to drop everything and help her raise that baby. My mom recently sent me yet another email telling me I need to stop trying to push away the people who love me. If these are the people who love me, I don't want to know what being hated feels like. My family has their golden child, and it's not me. So as far as I'm concerned, I have no family. They have nothing, absolutely nothing, that interests me at this point. There's no appeal in being part of that family. None. It's like wanting to be a member of the Addams family, except everyone's even crazier. And that's an experience I have no desire to go through. Update 3. I have news about Joan that I think might interest you. I know that if I were reading this story instead of being the protagonist, I'd want to know. A few days ago, I got a call from a mutual friend of mine and Joan's. Apparently, Joan has been completely missing for the past week and a half. She left her son, my nephew, with our parents and hasn't contacted anyone since. From what I've been told, she didn't leave a note or give any explanation about when she would return. My parents are now taking care of the baby, and they're not exactly happy about it because at their age, they didn't expect to be looking after a newborn and changing diapers. What they probably expected was that I do it instead. The baby isn't mine, they all made sure to remind me that during my divorce, so it's not my responsibility. I'd say it's my parents' responsibility since they've enabled this behavior from Joan. I don't know. Maybe telling my sister that sleeping with your sister's husband is wrong could have been a start. Maybe giving her a smack on the nose with a newspaper would have been a good idea. These are just ideas I'm coming up with at the moment. But I'm sure anything could have changed the outcome. I'm ready to receive the comments that say I should take care of my sister's baby because, since I can't have my own, I shouldn't be such a bitter person. That all this is just revenge. But if I had wanted to get revenge on them, I would have been much harsher. I'm just choosing to ignore them and let them deal with their own problems. Maybe I could use the newspaper on the nose technique with my parents, but to two old narcissistic dogs like them, there aren't many tricks I can teach them now. It's not even worth the newspaper. Besides, who buys it nowadays? Should I buy the digital version and use my tablet? Though, now that I think about it, that could hurt a little. I wouldn't even do that to a dog, the whole newspaper thing. But my parents test me all the time. Update 4. Here's another quick update. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and Joan still hasn't shown up. Is it time to call the kennel? As I mentioned in my last update, my parents have been trying to contact me nonstop since Joan disappeared. I finally called them. I wanted to set boundaries, and I was determined to stick to them no matter what. During the call, I made it clear that I won't help them financially, emotionally, or train my sister, who's acting like an unspayed street dog. And I've made it clear that they need to stop bothering me and my boyfriend. No calls, no emails, and no involving mutual friends in the mess. If they break this condition even once, we're going to have a serious problem. And I hope they understand because I definitely use some words I'm afraid to use here, seeing as many posts have been moderated over the years. To my surprise, they said they would stop bothering me. It'll be interesting to see how long they stick to this, but it's never too late to ruin their lives if they keep bothering me. I don't know what I can do against them because it's not like a restraining order would affect them. I'm open to ideas at this point. Update 5. I don't have an update on my parents, but I do have one about Phillips. He likes to surprise me, but never in a good way. Last week, Philip showed up at my house. It wasn't during the day, for a reasonable discussion, but very late at night, well after 11 p.m. We weren't expecting anyone, at least not at that hour, so we were a little confused. My boyfriend checked the doorbell camera, and there was Philip, sitting on the porch. He looked disoriented and exhausted, as if he had been walking aimlessly before deciding to show up. Maybe drunk too. We don't know how he figured out where we live, but if he could find my boyfriend's workplace, then I don't think it was that hard. We didn't answer the door. I was angry and scared at the same time. My boyfriend suggested waiting to see if he'd leave on his own. But he didn't. Instead, Philip stayed there. He didn't knock on the door again, didn't yell, or try to force his way in. He just sat on the porch like he belonged there, staring at the street. It was disturbing. Fortunately, the kids were at my boyfriend's parents' house that day, so they were completely out of danger. The whole situation felt like something out of a horror movie. Our neighbors started to notice too. Some reached out by text, asking if we were okay or needed help. Some even commented on how unsettling it was to see a guy just sitting on our porch at such a late hour. A neighbor with kids mentioned they were particularly anxious about how strange everything seemed. It didn't seem like Philip had any intention of leaving soon. It wasn't safe for us, and it wasn't fair to the neighbors who were also getting nervous. We decided to call the police. They took a while, but they arrived around midnight. When they did, they approached Philip and asked him to leave. He refused. He told them he just wanted to talk to me and wouldn't leave until he had the chance. That's when I mentioned the restraining order. The officers checked it on the spot, and their tone immediately changed. They didn't waste any time after that. They made it clear that he had violated the order and that he had to leave the property immediately. When he still resisted, they removed him from the porch and told him that any further violations could result in more serious consequences. Since the incident, my boyfriend and I have taken extra steps to increase security around the house. We're installing motion sensor lights, improving the locks, and looking into a more advanced security system. Sure, it's more expensive, but with the kids here, it's important. I don't want to live in fear, but I also don't want to underestimate what Phillips could do next. He knew all about the restraining order we filed some time ago and knew the consequences of showing up at my house. Still, he did it. I feel like he's trying to prove that he can do whatever he wants, and that really scares me. On top of that, I can't stop thinking about how this is affecting the neighbors. Phillips isn't just affecting us anymore, he's affecting other people too. A neighbor mentioned that they kept their kids inside the next day because they feared he might come back. I don't think he could harm other people's kids, but I'm not sure I can say the same about my boyfriend's kids. I'm thankful the restraining order was in effect, but I'm also realizing that it's not a magic solution. People like Phillips, who don't think coherently, don't seem to care about these things. I've filed another police report, and my lawyer is focusing on making the restraining order stronger. We're also considering other legal actions to ensure that Phillips faces serious consequences if he does this again. With everything that's happened over the last few months, I was sure my boyfriend would break up with me because he has 2 young kids. Who would want to put them in the middle of so much drama? But he's been by my side through all of this, and that's a lot more than Phillips has ever done. Imagine if this were the other way around. Phillips would have left me a long time ago. His kids still really like me, and that's the sweetest part of all. I hope things settle down a bit for now. That's the best I can hope for at this moment. Update 6. Joan has returned, but that's not the most disturbing part of this update. I'll start with Joan because the other part is a bit more extensive and will make my sister's situation seem less important. My sister came back after a few months, which was when she ran out of money. My parents, as expected, welcomed her with open arms. Do you want to know why she doesn't want to ask for child support from the baby's real father, which would surely make things easier for her? Because she doesn't want to be a mother and isn't even sure if that person is the father of the baby. My parents want her to stay, at least to be a mother to the baby, but she plans to leave again. But enough suspense. Let's talk about Philip. Philip attacked one of my coworkers. There are several locations for my company in the city, and because of my job, I can be at any of them depending on the tasks for the day. That day, I wasn't at the one he thought I'd be at. He tried to speak to one of my coworkers, and when she told him I wasn't there, he started demanding she tell him where I was. She realized he wasn't acting like a normal person and wasn't in his right mind, so she called security. But while security was on their way, he attacked her because he thought she was protecting me, which in a way, she was. Not only was he arrested for physically attacking my coworker, but his intention was to break the restraining order again. We submitted all of that with my lawyer in the investigation, along with other documents about his visit to my house. Can you believe that my mother-in-law tried to contact me to ask me to withdraw the report and the restraining order? She did it because her son might spend time in prison, and he's not a gangster who's used to that kind of life. I told her I couldn't care less, and that if they tried to embarrass him there, even though it's technically impossible, I wouldn't care too much. I told her that was her best shot at being a grandmother right now, and that's saying a lot. I expect updates, but I don't think they'll be anytime soon. The case is closed for now, but it's still waiting for trial, which could take a few months. Update 7. I think this will be the conclusion of my story, so I can just come back to read them. Though now, I think I'll take a break from reading Reddit stories, or at least stories like this, because it reminds me of Vietnam. Joan left again, leaving my parents with my nephew. She didn't even tell them who the baby's father might be so they could try to pursue child support. The last I know, according to what my mother writes in some sporadic emails, is that at least they're free from lawsuits. For me, it seems she's moved and lives in another city where she got a job. They still hope she'll eventually come to her senses and want to be a mother. But losing my ex affected her, and that's why she can't be near her son right now. If I could tell my sister anything, it's that losing him was the only good thing that's happened to her lately. As for Philip, he got 2 years for breaking the restraining order again, with the intention of being violent. Plus another 6 years for attacking my coworker, who obviously pressed charges and testified at his trial. Wow, she seemed even more eager to see him behind bars, and that's what she wanted for Christmas. I think 8 years is pretty good, and it frees us from my ex. I also attended his trial and ran into his mother, but she didn't say anything to me and couldn't even look me in the eye. If we ever meet again, here or on another sub, I hope it's not because of my story. I think I've had enough. And don't worry, no dogs were harmed during my story. I'd never do that to a dog. But some of the people did deserve it. My husband and mother-in-law thought the house was theirs when they threatened me with divorce, but now they can move in together to pursue their sick relationship, because it was my inheritance. I'm Katie, a 30-year-old office worker who somehow ended up in a situation straight out of a sitcom. I'm a hard-working woman, that's me, married to a man who's still attached to his mommy's apron strings. That's my husband, Gary. And then there's my mother-in-law, who seems to believe she's the Queen of England. I know what you're thinking. Katie, honey, why on earth did you marry a mama's boy? Well, let me tell you. Love makes you blind, deaf, and apparently, downright stupid. When I met Gary in college, he seemed like a dream come true, tall, handsome, and capable of forming complete sentences, which is rare in the wild jungle of higher education. A few years later, here I am, living in a gorgeous $2 million house with my husband and our daughter. A house I inherited from my father. Sounds like a fairy tale, right? Well, buckle up, because this is where things get interesting. You see, my dear husband and his oh-so-loving mother seem to be under the impression that this house, this beautiful, spacious, every bit worth $2 million house, was the result of Gary's hard work and his mother's impeccable taste. But before I reveal the juicy details of how I pulled off the scam of the century, let me take you on a journey through the hilarious, frustrating, and downright absurd events that led to the moment when I finally decided to drop the most epic truth bomb. I was a bright-eyed college student full of dreams and expectations when I met Gary, armed with nothing but ambition, a stack of textbooks, and an unhealthy addiction to cafeteria coffee. Gary came into my life like a knight in shining armor, if that armor were made of football jerseys and beer cans. Our eyes met in a crowded lecture hall, and it was love at first sight. Well, okay, not exactly. He actually spilled his energy drink all over my notes, and I may have said a few words that would make a sailor blush. But hey, nothing says true love like ruined notes and sticky fingers, right? From that moment on, we were inseparable. The first sign of Gary's special relationship with his mother came on our third date. Picture the scene. Candlelit dinner, soft music, the two of us gazing lovingly into each other's eyes. Then Gary's phone rings. He ignores it, like any sane person would on a date. Right? Wrong. Our dear Gary practically lunges across the table to answer. "Hi, Mom," he says, with all the enthusiasm of a golden retriever seeing its owner after 5 minutes apart. What followed was a 15-minute conversation about whether he remembered to pack his lucky underwear for exam week. I wish I were joking. I really do. Did I run for the hills like any self-respecting woman would? No. I sat there, sipping my cheap, lukewarm wine, thinking, how sweet, he loves his mom. Past Katie, if I could go back in time and slap some sense into you, I would. Hard. Years go by, and suddenly, we're engaged. How did that happen, you ask? Well, let's just say it involved a hidden ring, a poorly executed proposal speech that mentioned his mother no less than 5 times, and me, in my infinite wisdom, saying yes. The wedding planning phase was an experience, and by experience, I mean a nightmare sprinkled with my future mother-in-law's passive-aggressive comments. This, my friends, is where Carol truly began to shine. Every decision, from the napkin colors to the cake flavor, had to be Carol approved. God forbid we chose lilac instead of mauve for the bridesmaids' dresses. Carol nearly had an aneurysm over it. And Gary? Well, he was as useful as a chocolate teapot. Every time I tried to get his opinion on something, he'd shrug and say, "Whatever you and Mom think is best, babe." I should have known then that I wasn't just marrying Gary. I was entering a polygamous relationship with him and his mother. But the real fun began when we started house hunting. Most couples look for a house together. Maybe they bring a real estate agent or a trusted friend for a second opinion. Not us. That would be too normal. We brought Carol. The final straw was when we found a house that everyone approved of, and by everyone, I mean Carol gave her blessing, and I was too exhausted to keep arguing. As we stood in the living room, Carol turned to Gary, tears in her eyes, and said, "Oh, honey, I can see our family gathered here on Christmas morning." Our family, not your family, ours. I was standing right there, and somehow, I had already been erased from the picture. Did Gary correct her? Of course not. He just nodded, probably picturing himself in footy pajamas opening gifts while his beloved mommy looked on with adoring eyes. At this point, you're probably wondering why I didn't run. Believe me, I've asked myself that question approximately 37,042 times since. But love, sleep deprivation from house hunting, and the sunk cost fallacy are a dangerous combination. So, against all better judgment, and probably several laws of nature, we got married. The wedding was, well, let's just say if you look up, circus, in the dictionary, you'd find a picture of our wedding party. Carol wore white. Yep, you read that right, white. To her own son's wedding. When I pointed it out to Gary, he just shrugged and said, "Mom says it's more of an off-white." Off-white, my ass. It was whiter than a polar bear in a snowstorm. But we got through it. We said our I do's, cut the cake, and embarked on our new life together. And by together, I mean with Carol's constant presence lurking in the background. Now, you'd think that once we were married and settled into our new home, the one Carol picked, remember, things would calm down. Nope. Married life with Gary was like a three-legged race, except the third leg was Carol's, and she was always trying to trip me. She was everywhere. If she wasn't physically present, she was in spirit, living rent-free in Gary's head and dictating every aspect of our lives. Thinking about buying a new couch? Better check with Carol first. Thinking about trying a new recipe for dinner? Oh no, Gary only likes meals just like his mother makes them. Thinking about painting the guest room? Hold on, young lady, Carol might not like that color scheme. And before I knew it, I was pregnant. Most women enjoy their pregnancies, baby showers, decorating the nursery, basking in the glow of impending motherhood. I got Carol's constant commentary on everything I ate, drank, or did. And Gary? He nodded along to everything his mother said. Giving birth should have been my breaking point, but it wasn't. That came later, much later, because remember that $2 million house I mentioned? That's where things really start to get interesting. But more on that later. For now, I need a strong drink, and possibly a lobotomy to erase the image of Carol in her off-white wedding dress. Update 1. Last time, I left you with the birth of my daughter and my brilliant decision to switch jobs. Now, let's fast forward to when things really started heating up. There we were, a happy family of 3. Or 4, if you counted Carol, which, apparently, Gary always did. Our daughter was growing faster than the mountain of dirty laundry Gary refused to acknowledge, and we were starting to feel a little cramped in our current home. You know, the house that Carol had so generously picked for us when we were newlyweds. One fine morning, over a breakfast of burnt toast, my dear husband hit me with something that almost made me choke on my charcoal-flavored crust. "Babe," he said with all the grace of a bull in a china shop, "I've been thinking. Mom's getting older, and I'm worried about her future. What if we find a place where we can all live together?" Now, I pride myself on being a reasonable person. I had endured Carol's constant meddling, Gary's inability to make decisions without consulting the mothership, but this was too much. I tried reasoning with him. I pointed out that Carol was preserved like fine wine, full of enough preservatives to outlive us all. I reminded him that we valued our privacy. But no, Gary was determined. He had a whole speech prepared about family values and taking care of our elders. I'm pretty sure Carol wrote it for him and made him practice in front of a mirror. I had a choice. Accept living with the woman who had made it her life's mission to critique every aspect of my existence, or be the evil daughter-in-law denying sweet Carol the joy of watching her granddaughter grow up. But your girl Katie doesn't back down without a fight, right? So, I put on my big girl pants and proposed a compromise. We'd look for a house, sure, but one near Carol's, not with her. Close enough for frequent visits, but far enough that I could pretend the doorbell was broken when I needed a sanity break. Shockingly, Gary agreed. I suspect he was just relieved I didn't file for divorce on the spot, or check him into a psych ward for even suggesting such madness. Now, remember that house I inherited from my dad? Well, here's where things get interesting. See, I hadn't told Gary about this little inheritance. Why? Because I knew the moment Carol found out, she'd start mentally redecorating the place. But mostly, I just wanted something that was mine. So, I casually suggested we look in the area where, coincidentally, my inherited property happened to be. Gary suspected nothing. He was too busy making sure every house we toured had a suitable guest room for his mother's extended stays. Eventually, we found the perfect house, by which I mean I convinced Gary and Carol that the house I already owned was on the market and just ideal for us. Because of course, a bigger house didn't discourage Carol, it just gave her more space to spread her unique brand of chaos. She started visiting all the time. First once a week, then twice, then every other day. Soon, I was making excuses to work late just to avoid coming home and finding her rearranging my pantry or giving me lectures on the proper way to fold fitted sheets. Gary? Oh, he was thrilled. He had his mommy close, doting on him, cooking his favorite meals. I did what any decent daughter would do. I adjusted my work schedule, kissed my daughter goodbye, and prepared to split my time between my house and my parents. Gary's response? Exactly what you'd expect. He mumbled something about how hard it would be for him to manage without me. Like he was the one juggling a job, a child, and 2 ailing parents. And then, brace yourself, he had the audacity to suggest that maybe Carol should move in full-time to help. But I didn't have time for a breakdown. I had parents to care for, a daughter to raise, and a job to keep. So I did what women have done since the dawn of time. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and powered through. What I didn't expect was Carol's reaction to my new schedule. You'd think she'd be thrilled. After all, I was gone more often, meaning she had free rein to redecorate and spoil her precious boy. But no. To her, me prioritizing my parents meant I was neglecting my duties as a wife and mother. Everything exploded one night when I came home late, emotionally drained, only to find Carol in my kitchen, purse-lipped and full of judgment. Katie, she said in that syrupy voice that made me want to commit a felony, we need to talk about your priorities. And that, dear Reddit, is where I'll leave you, for now. Because what happened next? Well, that's a story of its own. Update 2. I was in my kitchen, so exhausted I could barely see straight. I'd spent the day juggling work calls, changing my dad's IV, and trying to convince my mom to eat something other than stale cookies and sadness. And now here was Carol, staring at me, accusing me. What came out of my mouth was a tidal wave of frustration, rage, and enough curse words to invent a whole new language of swearing. It was like a dam had broken, and years of bottled-up resentment came pouring out. Carol did not take it well. Her face cycled through more colors than a chameleon in a bag of Skittles. And then, in walked Gary. Was he ready to defend my honor and put his mother in her place? Of course not. Gary took one look at the scene, his wife, red with fury and possibly foaming at the mouth, and his precious mother, looking like she was about to faint onto the nearest couch. And guess what he did? He took her side. In the grand showdown between his wife and his mother, Gary chose his mom. He launched into a speech about respect, family values, and how I was tearing this family apart with my selfish behavior. But oh, Gary wasn't done. No, he saved the best for last. In a move he probably thought was his trump card, he dropped this gem. If you ever wanted a divorce, you and our daughter wouldn't be able to make it on your own. Do you understand that? Oh, sweet Gary, you just royally screwed up. I laughed. Gary and Carol looked at me like I had finally lost my mind. And maybe I had. But in losing it, I also found something, my backbone. Once I could breathe again, I straightened up, wiped my tears, and said the words that changed everything. Honey, who said I'd be the one who couldn't make it? The confusion on their faces was priceless. You could practically see the hamsters in their heads sprinting on their wheels, trying to process what I had just said. And that's when I dropped the biggest truth bomb of all. I told them everything. About the house. About how it wasn't just any house. It was a $2 million property I inherited from my father. About how every mortgage payment, every tax bill, and every leaky faucet repair had been paid with my money. Gary's face went from confusion to disbelief, and then to something that looked suspiciously like fear. Carol, on the other hand, cycled through shock, indignation, and then settled on a kind of calculating interest that gave me chills. But I wasn't done. I was on a roll, and short of divine intervention, nothing was going to shut me up. I laid it all out, how I had bitten my tongue for years, tolerated Carol's meddling and Gary's lack of a spine, how I had changed jobs, sacrificed my career, and bent over backwards to accommodate all their whims. For what? To be treated like a glorified maid in my own damn house? I made it crystal clear. Things were going to change. No more surprise visits from Carol. No more redecorating without my permission. No more treating me like some charity case who should be grateful for the crumbs of affection they decided to toss my way. And as for Gary, I told him he had a choice to make. He could start acting like a husband and father, or he could pack his bags and move in with his beloved mother. Because I was done. Done. Carol, predictably, burst into crocodile tears. She wailed about how she only ever wanted the best for the family, how she couldn't believe I had deceived them. How could I be so cruel to poor, sweet Gary? Gary, meanwhile, looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He stammered, he sputtered, and he even tried to argue that surely, as my husband, he had some rights to the house. I did what any reasonable woman in my situation would do. I called a lawyer. The kind of lawyer that makes other lawyers wake up in a cold sweat at night. Because if Gary thought he could intimidate me with divorce threats, oh boy, was he in for a surprise. My lawyer assured me that not only was the house entirely mine, but if Gary wanted to push for a divorce, he'd be lucky if he walked away with the clothes on his back. Of course, this is real life, not a movie, so things didn't magically resolve overnight. Gary, Indiana, a surprising display of survival instinct, seemed to realize just how badly he'd screwed up. He started talking about couples therapy, about fixing things, about how much he loved me and our daughter. As for Carol, well, let's just say she didn't take her new persona non grata status very well. She tried everything: emotional blackmail, love bombing, even a half-baked attempt at an apology. But I stood firm. My house, my rules. And my rules said no more Carol. I realized that by standing up for myself, by refusing to be a doormat one more time, I was teaching my daughter the most valuable lesson of all. She deserves respect. She doesn't have to put up with anyone's abuse. Not even from family. Especially not from family. Now, I know you're all dying to know what happened next. Well, my dear nosy friends, that's a story for another day. For now, let's just say life is interesting. Challenging, yes, but also liberating in ways I never imagined. I'm rediscovering who I am without Gary's expectations and Carol's constant criticism weighing me down. So if you're out there, dealing with your own Gary or Carol, remember this. You are worth more than you think. You deserve more than you believe. And sometimes, the most freeing thing you can do is stand up and say, no more. Edit. Holy hell, this blew up overnight. I cannot believe how invested you all are in my drama. Your comments and messages have me alternating between laughing my ass off and ugly crying into my wine glass. Thank you all for the support, advice, and the truly creative suggestions about what I should do with Carol's house key. No, I will not be supergluing it inside a fish and mailing it to her. Though I have to admit, the temptation is real. To answer some common questions. Yes, I'm keeping the house. It's legally mine, and no amount of tantrums from man-child Gary is going to change that. No, I haven't kicked Gary out yet. We're in this weird limbo where he's trying to convince me he can change, and I'm trying to decide if I even want him to. Carol is currently banned from the house. She's been informed that if she shows up uninvited, I won't hesitate to call the police. The resting BTCH face she made was chef's kiss. To the many people asking for Carol's number because she sounds hot, seek help. Seriously, yes, I changed the locks and the security code. As for my daughter, she's fine. Kids are resilient, and I'm making sure she knows none of this is her fault. Honestly, she seems happier since Carol stopped visiting. Shocker. And finally, to the person who suggested I write a book, don't tempt me. 50 Shades of Mauve. A Mother-in-Law's Tale. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Thanks again, Reddit. Your support means more than you know. I'll update when I can, but for now, I've got a life to rebuild, and a whole lot of mauve to paint over. Update 3. I'm back because I know you've all been waiting for the grand conclusion to this story in my wonderful marriage, if you catch the sarcasm. I bet you're dying to know whether Gary stayed with me or ran back to his beloved mommy. Well, let me tell you, he never really had a choice. Though, to be honest, if he had a choice, he probably would have picked his mother. Luckily, right after my last update, the divorce papers were ready to be served. The look on Gary's face when he got them was priceless. A mix of shock, worry, and total confusion, like he couldn't believe what was happening. He acted like divorce was the most absurd thing in the world, like he never saw it coming. But honestly, the real absurdity was that I didn't file for divorce way sooner. Actually, the real weird thing was that I married him in the first place, or that I didn't run for the hills the first time he gave me very clear signs of being a mama's boy. Along with the divorce papers came, of course, an eviction notice. No way was I letting him stay in my house a second longer than necessary. The good news for him? He didn't have to move very far. His new, and old, address was exactly where we all expected, his mommy's house. Naturally, I did make that comment, thinking it'd be great news for him. I mean, what could be better than living with his precious mother? Oddly enough, he wasn't thrilled. Why? No clue. You'd think he'd love it with all that emotional incest. Because it's just emotional, right? Luckily, he didn't take long to leave. It only took a few days to pack up and move, probably because he already had some clothes at his mom's house. Why? I don't know, and I don't want to know. Once he was out, things moved along smoothly. The divorce process took a few months, as these things do, but eventually, it was finalized. I kept the house. My sister used the baby shower I organized for her to humiliate me about my infertility, but they didn't know I was pregnant at the time. 2 months ago, my husband Jason and I received the most beautiful surprise. We found out we were expecting a baby. You might wonder why this is so important. The reason is that over the last 2 years, we've had a tough journey trying to start a family. Getting pregnant wasn't easy at all. At one point, I did get pregnant, but unfortunately I had a miscarriage. After that loss, we decided to stop actively trying to have a baby. We didn't feel defeated, it just seemed like the universe wasn't ready for us to have one. Or at least, not right then. So we decided to leave things in the universe's hands and focus on other parts of our lives. But in the end, the universe showed us it had a plan for us, just not on the timeline we expected. 2 months ago, I woke up feeling a bit off. I felt heavier than usual and the nausea hit me pretty hard, like the classic morning sickness you always hear about. At first, I thought it might just be a cold or something I ate, but then a little thought crept in, could I be pregnant? I decided to take a pregnancy test just to be sure. When I saw the positive result, it was such a huge shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing because we had already resigned ourselves to the idea that it wouldn't happen. Jason and I were overwhelmed with joy. We were smiling, crying, and just soaking in the news. Since then, we haven't stopped talking about it. There's so much to plan and we're thrilled that at last our dream is coming true. Even though we're super excited, we decided to keep the news just between us for now, since it's still very early in the pregnancy, only 2 months. We want to be cautious. We've made the mistake in the past of telling people, only to later suffer another miscarriage. It's so hard not only to go through that, but to have to tell others who already knew you were pregnant. As for family, Jason isn't in touch with his because they've always been really toxic. He made the decision to cut ties with them for his own peace of mind, and I totally support that. So the only real family we have is mine. Even though my family is supportive and loving, we're still waiting to tell them. Another reason I've been holding off on announcing my pregnancy is because this week was my younger sister Brooke's baby shower. Brooke is also pregnant with her first child, and just like us, she's thrilled at the idea of being a mom. It's been wonderful to see her so happy, and it's clear that this is a very special moment for her. My parents are excited too, since this will be their first grandchild. Everyone had been focused on Brooke's pregnancy, and honestly, I didn't want to steal any of her spotlight. Brooke can be a bit sensitive about attention, and I completely understand that. She's always liked her moments to be celebrated without any distractions, and this baby shower was one of those moments. If it was important for her, I could keep my news under wraps for a while and reveal it later. It wouldn't hurt to wait, especially given what I mentioned earlier. For the shower, Brooke trusted me to plan the whole event. She gave me the responsibility of creating something specifically for her, sharing countless Pinterest boards, photos, and ideas for the themes and decorations she wanted. It was clear she had a dream for her baby shower, and I was determined to make it come true for her. I had some ideas that were tough to pull off in reality, but since she's my sister I put in the extra work. It took a lot of time, effort, and energy, but I didn't mind. When the big day arrived, I was there early because there were still a few details to sort out, and I wanted to make sure nothing was out of place. I was running around because I don't have a ton of experience with these things, so I made up for it with hard work. I was exhausted, but I love doing nice things for people I care about. If she came in and found the party of her dreams, all the hard work would have been worth it. And it definitely paid off, because when she arrived and saw everything, she was really happy with how I set up the place. It was exactly like the Pinterest photos she'd shared with me. She couldn't stop praising how perfect everything was, so everything had gone just right. Plus, I felt good about doing something I'd never done perfectly on the first try. Up to that point, everything was perfect. The guests were having a great time, everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, and there wasn't a single fire to put out. My mom arrived shortly after and pulled me aside to thank me. She told me how much she appreciated the effort I'd put into making this day amazing for Brooke. I'd also planned some fun games, and soon everyone was laughing and having a good time. Everything was going well and the focus was completely on Brooke, just as she'd wanted. Then, Claudia arrived. Claudia is my sister's best friend and they've been close since they were kids. Although Brooke adores her, the truth is Claudia and I have never gotten along. From my perspective, Claudia is the kind of person who travels with a cloud of drama around her. She's one of those people who always needs to have the last word in an argument, speaks loudly when she argues, insists she's always right, and has a penchant for drama. I've always tried to avoid her because that usually prevents a lot of the drama that comes with her. Since this was my sister's baby shower, I really had no choice but to invite her. The first thing she said when she entered was a disparaging comment about how cheesy the party's theme was. For her, she would have done a much better job planning the event. I bit my lip, trying to keep my cool, and looked at my sister to see her reaction. To my surprise, Brooke simply ignored Claudia's comments, smiling and happily greeting her. That could have been just that one comment, but with Claudia, the drama doesn't stop there. Throughout the afternoon, she kept making passive-aggressive remarks toward me, even in front of other guests. Every chance she got, she said that the planning wasn't the best. Everyone else seemed happy with what I had organized, especially my sister and my mom, but Claudia obviously wasn't. Still, I kept quiet for Brooke's sake. But if you know someone like Claudia, you know that one person isn't enough. At one point, she came over and made a sarcastic comment about the catering, suggesting that I should have hired a more expensive caterer instead of someone who, according to her, she had found on the street. I calmly replied that the caterer I chose was very well known and highly recommended. Besides, everyone at the party seemed to love the food, so I couldn't understand why she felt the need to complain. Then came the most absurd part. She argued that the food was too greasy for her taste, even as she was still eating it. That's when I lost my patience. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Well, if you think it's so greasy and bad, maybe you should stop eating it." I pointed out, loud enough for everyone to hear, that I'd already seen her finish 2 full plates and now she was on her 3rd. So if the food wasn't up to par, why was she still eating? The only thing overly greasy here was her. That left her speechless and she walked away, red with embarrassment. Later, it was time to open Brooke's gifts. And that's when Claudia needed to ruin things again because she just couldn't stand to see happy people doing something. She raised her glass forcefully, drawing everyone's attention, and announced that she wanted to give a speech. At first, she talked about Brooke, how excited she was to meet the baby and how much she valued their friendship. But then, without missing a beat, she added, "I wish it had been me organizing this party instead of your childless sister." Claudia was still stuck on what she'd said, and her way of attacking me hit a very sensitive spot. I might have provoked her, but she's a compulsive drama queen who only does things to complain. I gave Claudia a look, silently asking her to drop it, trying to keep my cool, but then she went even further. Claudia smirked mockingly and said, "But you know, Brooke, I understand why you let your sister organize all this. I mean, this is probably the closest she'll ever get to having a baby shower, with all her fertility issues and everything." I was stunned, watching her giggle and look at me with clear satisfaction. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I asked Claudia directly, "What do you mean by fertility issues?" She feigned surprise, acting like she didn't know, and replied, "Oh, didn't you know this was supposed to be a secret? You weren't meant to say anything." She went on to say that Brooke had told her everything about how you can't have a baby and how I even had a miscarriage. I assumed everyone else already knew. I stood up, trembling with anger and disbelief. I looked at Brooke, expecting at least my sister to say something in my defense. After all, she was my sister and she knew that what Claudia was doing was wrong on so many levels. But to my shock and disappointment, Brooke completely avoided my gaze. She didn't say a word. Fortunately, my mom stepped in, trying to calm things down. She scolded Claudia, telling her she shouldn't say such stupid things, especially while drunk. But then, instead of fully supporting me, she turned to me and said, "Let it go, it's not that big of a deal." After spending so much time organizing everything, I was being humiliated and my family couldn't even defend me. Without another second, I turned around to grab my things. I just wanted to get out of there. As I grabbed my purse and coat, I announced loudly that I wasn't going to stay there another minute and that the baby shower could go on without me. Both Brooke and my mom tried to stop me immediately. My mom tried to convince me that I didn't have to leave, and Brooke ran after me, visibly upset, begging me to stay and saying that I was overreacting and making a scene over something that was meant as a joke. She kept defending Claudia, insisting that her best friend hadn't really meant what she said, that Claudia was just being Claudia. She begged me not to leave, saying I was making things awkward for everyone. I paused and looked at her, trying to keep my voice steady. I said, "Okay, I'll stay, but only if you kick Claudia out. I'm not going to be in the same room as that woman after what she just said to me." But instead of agreeing, Brooke hesitated. She seemed torn and then started to explain. Her excuse was, "I can't do that. Claudia is important to me. She's my best friend." I asked, even after what she just said to me, even after everything she said to humiliate me in front of everyone. Brooke just shrugged as if it was nothing. Then she said something I'll never forget. "It's not like Claudia lied, she just told the truth. You have fertility issues, you had a miscarriage, and you can't have kids. Why are you so upset? It's not like what she said isn't true." I managed to ask, "Are you serious?" Brooke didn't even flinch. She just looked at me and said, "You need to stop feeling so insecure about it and just accept it, it's your reality." That was worse than what Claudia had said, because it came from my own sister. I was already mad about what Claudia said. It was hurtful, but I knew I wouldn't have to see her again and that anger would fade. But my sister, that was completely different. I organized the party exactly as she wanted, with all the special touches she asked for, and this is how she repaid me. My instinct was to scream at her, to say the words that would shut her and Claudia up once and for all. I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a baby, but I held back. I didn't want anyone to find out about my pregnancy in such a way, especially not in the middle of all this chaos. Instead, I took a deep breath and spoke calmly, "You and I are done." I reminded her of everything I had done for her before that day, how I moved heaven and earth to get her all the stupid things she wanted, even at the expense of my own free time and energy. And all of that was just so I could let myself be humiliated in front of everyone, and then be treated even worse. Before she could respond, I added, "I paid for half of the Catherine's bill, but as far as I'm concerned, you're covering the rest. I'm not paying another cent for your stupid baby shower." I could see she was regretting everything, because the Catherine's bill isn't something she can easily afford. She likes expensive things, but she rarely works hard enough to afford such a lifestyle. Since that day, my mom has been furious with me. Yes, with me. She isn't mad at my sister for what she did, but for what I did. It's not like she said, "You're the bad one," but it made it seem like I could have done something differently to prevent all this from escalating. She also told me that after the shower, Brooke didn't have enough money to cover the rest of the Catherine's bill and had to dip into her savings to pay it. I guess there's a nice lesson to be learned there. That's why my mom is pressuring me to make up with Brooke and pay the remaining part of the Catherine's bill. But every time my mom brings it up, I feel like I did the right thing. If Brooke wanted a party to humiliate me, at least she should pay for it, don't you think? I'm not willing to apologize, make up, or pay for any of it. It should be my sister who pays me back for all the effort. When you treat your family like garbage, you can't expect them to do favors for you. So, do you think I'm the bad guy for making her pay half of the Catherine's bill? I believe I am, but only for asking her to pay half, not the full cost of the party. Update 1. I'm using this update to clarify. My sister not only wanted me to organize the baby shower, but she also expected me to pay for the whole thing. She said that, as the older sister, it would be a sweet gesture to pay for it and show love and support for her future baby. What I heard was, "I can't afford all that Pinterest crap, so you, who can afford it, help me out, right?" I had already paid for half of the Catherine and was planning to cover the rest during the event. However, after everything that happened, I didn't want to spend another cent on her. I'm actually glad she had no choice but to use her own savings, and no, I'm not giving her that money back. As I said, if I decided to ask for the rest, I'd probably end up ruined since her savings are pretty limited. Since the party, Brooke and my mom have been trying to make me feel guilty so that I'd talk to them and have an adult conversation, as they put it, but I've been avoiding their calls. In fact, when my husband Jason found out about everything that went down at the party, he was absolutely furious. He couldn't believe how I was treated, not just by Claudia, but by my own sister and mom. He was so angry and wasn't about to sit back while someone disrespected me so openly. So, he found Claudia on Instagram and sent her a direct message, making it crystal clear what he thought of her behavior. He told her that if she had so much to say about a woman's struggles with fertility, especially without any proof, then he and I wouldn't hesitate to sue her for defamation. He made it clear that he wasn't like my mom or my sister, who just sat there while she humiliated me. And he didn't stop there. He said that if she had anything else to say about me, he'd be more than happy to meet her face to face to hear it. Apparently, his message must have really shaken Claudia. She replied with an apology, though it sounded pretty insincere. She tried to justify her actions by saying she couldn't remember much of what happened because she was so drunk. Claudia's apology means nothing, but seeing her back off out of fear has been worth it. Update 2. A month after everything from my first post happened, I officially cut ties with my family. You know how Brooke and my mom wouldn't let things cool off. I even told them they could start by giving me a genuine apology, although I wasn't planning on reimbursing my sister. My mom apologized, but it was a half apology that quickly turned into, "But Brooke did this," or "Brooke did that." Even as she was apologizing, she couldn't help but say that part of the blame was mine for leaving and humiliating Brooke in front of everyone. Yeah, that kind of apology, in quotes. Brooke, on the other hand, flat out refused to apologize in any way. She even tried to play the victim, insisting that she wasn't responsible for what her best friend said to me. She kept saying, "It's not my business." But I wasn't asking for an apology for her friend, I was asking for one for what she said afterward, though she had an excuse for that too. Then she went even further. Brooke started demanding money from me, saying I should reimburse her for the remaining costs of the Catherine that she had to cover. She used her baby as leverage to make me feel guilty, because I had made her spend money she planned to save for after the baby was born. Well, I don't care. I still stand by my decision not to give her a single cent. When I refused, she threatened me even more, insisting that if I didn't pay up, she wouldn't let me see her baby once it was born. I calmly told her I didn't care, I didn't want to see her or her kid anyway. So I cut her off and stopped talking to her. Then, yesterday, after days of silence, Brooke reached out to me using her husband's phone number. She sent me messages like nothing had ever happened between us. She asked if I'd be willing to babysit her baby once it was born because she'd have to go back to work. She explained that she and her husband had discussed it and that, with their budget, they couldn't afford a nanny. Plus, our mom refused to help, so Brooke expected me to step in. She even wrote that she was willing to let everything that had happened go if I agreed to help out and take care of her kid. I simply replied with one word, no. Brooke didn't take that well. Immediately, she started bombarding me with messages, calling me a miserable, worthless sister. She accused me of being sad and lonely, saying I should be grateful for the chance to babysit her baby, as if I owed her that. Keep in mind, Brooke still doesn't know that I'm pregnant. I haven't told anyone yet, not even my own family, and I feel like none of them deserve to know anything yet. My mom, as always, couldn't just stand aside and decided to get involved. She called me today, telling me that I needed to stop holding a grudge against Brooke, that Brooke wasn't to blame for what Claudia said that day. She went on and on about how we're still sisters and that Brooke is my family. She argued that by helping Brooke and her husband, I'd be doing them a huge favor after all that was provoked. I told her that if she was so concerned, she should be the one to help Brooke, because if she didn't like the idea, she was still her daughter. She said it wasn't the same because she'd already done the work of taking care of us, and now it was our turn to take care of each other. And to rub salt in the wound, she added that it would do me good to have some baby contact. That was the last straw. I ended up blocking her and any numbers my sister or mom might use to contact me. For example, my dad, who's been staying out of all of this. He hasn't shown much support, and honestly, I'm not even in the mood to talk to him anymore. At this point, I just want peace. I don't want anything to do with them. I'm so exhausted from all the drama. I need time away from it all to focus on myself. I just hope, for my own sanity, that after all this, they'll leave me alone. I don't want to hear any more of their nonsense. Update 3. It's been such a long time since I last posted an update here. For those of you who have been following my story, the most important news is that I gave birth to a beautiful daughter this week. And my husband and I are absolutely over the moon. She is truly the cutest little thing, and we're both completely in love with her. We never imagined we could love someone so much, but here's the proof. Now, for those wondering, I never officially announced my pregnancy to anyone. Since I cut ties with most of my family, no one knew I was pregnant or that I had given birth until this week, when I simply shared a photo of my daughter. I felt that was the right way to announce her arrival. As you can imagine, people got really excited when they saw my post. I've received countless congratulatory messages from my grandparents and distant relatives, all eager to meet my little one. It feels bad to have kept all this from them, but I didn't want my sister or my mom to bring any drama during my last few months of pregnancy. However, the most surprising part of all this was when my dad finally got in touch. He called me from his office phone and told me how shocked he was to learn I now had a baby, since he hadn't even known I was pregnant. I had to point out that he hadn't contacted me in all these months, so how was he supposed to know? It's not like I kept it a secret just to spite him. Simply put, no one was there to support me when I needed it, so I didn't feel the need to share anything with them. My dad was blocked, but when it mattered to him, he found a way to reach out, if it was convenient for him, that is. But when I was seen as an infertile woman who couldn't give him grandkids, he didn't have my number. Curious, isn't it? Then my dad went on to say that my mom, Brooke, and some other relatives were upset with me for keeping my pregnancy a secret. He said that at the end of the day, we're family and I should have shared such important news, no matter what had happened between us. I listened, but honestly, I wasn't interested in hearing it. I told him that he, my mom, and Brooke could feel however they wanted, but I wasn't going to listen to any of it. I asked him not to call me again unless he had something else to talk about, not my mom and not my sister. To be completely honest, I'm not mad at my family anymore, but I just don't want them in my life. I have more important things to focus on now, priorities that are worth far more than my parents' or my sister's hurt feelings. Update 4. You won't believe the latest twist, the irony of all ironies. My sister needed help with a babysitter because both she and her husband work, but they couldn't afford one. At least not a decent, qualified one. So they ended up hiring the worst babysitter in the world, Claudia. It wasn't like they were paying her, but since Claudia is a housewife, and not very good at it, by the way, she agreed to look after my nephew, who's now just over a year old. Up to that point, nothing seemed too bad. It was Claudia they should have asked for help, not me, and finally, they did. But Claudia had a habit of using Brooke's house like a hotel to meet up with her lover. At this point, I'm not even sure if there's more than one guy involved, but that doesn't really change the issue. The problem here is that instead of taking care of the child, she was in one of the rooms, taking care of a different kind of kid. A grown man with special needs, so to speak. Brooke's husband discovered this when he got to the house early, before Claudia was done with her extra babysitting duties. You might think, well, it's not that bad, they just fired her from her unpaid job and found a real babysitter. Maybe even Brooke has cut ties with Claudia and they're no longer friends. Well, think again, because Brooke knew about this. She was aware of her friend's infidelities and still defended her, even giving her a free place to carry them out. Now, if you're looking in the mirror and you have that surprised look on your face, imagine my brother-in-law's expression when he told Brooke what he saw earlier that day, and noticed that her face wasn't as shocked as yours might be right now. My brother-in-law even had a paternity test done on the baby, because his first thought was that Brooke was being unfaithful too, and at least the test didn't confirm that she was. Now he's asking for a divorce and full custody, because he knew that his wife's friend was hooking up with some guy in another room. Not only was she leaving the baby alone, but she was also letting strangers into the house and behaving inappropriately. Now my sister has moved in with our parents, and they're the ones taking care of her baby while the divorce and custody battle play out. I just want to say, Brooke, you have some really good friends, and you defend them well. It really says a lot about you. Edit. I almost forgot to update after more than a year of not posting, but I popped on Reddit, saw some notifications, and remembered to update. My brother-in-law has been granted full custody of the child, while my sister still lives with our parents. Now I just have one question for you all. Do you think I should send them a Pinterest board full of ideas on how to decorate your room in your parents' house after the divorce?